I'm Shelby Williams with Plano City Council, and I'm very pleased to announce that the City of Plano has adopted the no new revenue property tax rate for the 4th year in a row. So I've got several things to say about that, but first, a word from our sponsor. I'm joking, we don't have any sponsors. This is free to the public. I'm going to go through the rest of the other items in the meeting first because I do want to explain several things about the no new revenue rate. So first, in the preliminary open meeting, we discussed the planning for Plano's Sesquicentennial celebration. That's 150th anniversary. We were chartered as a city, or we became a city, June 2nd, 1873. We are actually going to celebrate our birthday on June 3rd, which is a Saturday of 2023, next year. So a sesquicentennial is not to be confused with a Sasquatch centennial, which is the anniversary of the filming of Bigfoot in California. We then had a discussion of the HOME-ARP funds. So long story short, we have $2 million in funding from the ARP money, the American Rescue Plan Act, which, bear in mind, is our own people's money anyway that was taken away through federal taxes or inflation or both. Pardon me. That's coming back to us, which we can use either on, a number of things regarding homelessness. We are substantially providing most of that money for homelessness prevention, rent and utility assistance, as well as counseling. There will be a couple of parameters like that, such as you can only be used once every 3 years. Apparently there are some frequent flyers with the program we had in place before, and we're going to explore maybe tiered funding. You can go no more than 80% of the area median income, but we're going to look at a tiered funding system for those under 50% of area median income, then up to 60, maybe 70, and then no more than 80. So that'll be decided a little ways into the future. My feeling is that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So I think putting this toward homelessness prevention provides much greater overall value for the community than addressing those who, than using the same money to address those who are already homeless. Plus, as we discussed in the meeting, actually providing homeless housing like this is a much more expensive proposition. We did have a short-term rental update, but primarily several members of the community spoke. And I've talked about this at length. We will have a larger update on October 10th. Now in the regular meeting, we've announced that September 22nd through 25th is going to be the HEB Central Market Plano Balloon Festival. The past 2 years, the Balloon Festival was canceled due to the pandemic, and we are very glad this is going to be back later this month at Oak Point Park. Neighborhood Services Property Standards Division received renewed accreditation, as well as they earned the Excellence in Code Enforcement Award. So very well done to our Neighborhood Services group. We had a consideration for quote-unquote affordable housing, which means taxpayer-subsidized housing, for 80 multifamily units at the corner of Jupiter and Los Rios in East Plano. And that was tabled till the next meeting because the developer didn't have their certification of zoning signs ready. There are some other considerations there, but this was denied by Planning and Zoning 8-0. So we'll be talking about that more coming up. The last several items were to approve the budget of $675.9 million, the CIP, which is the Community Investment Program, of $332.7 million, and the new property tax rate of 41.76 cents per $100 of valuation. That's 11.5 cents for interest and sinking, which just means the debt, and 30.26 cents for the maintenance and operations, M&O portion of the tax rate. So all of these are part and parcel to the 2022-23 budget cycle, and which will go into effect on October 1st. So all of these were unanimous votes. The 41.76 cents per $100 of valuation, that is what is now called the no new revenue rate. So here I'm going to go into some explanation and some history. In 2019, the Texas legislature passed Senate Bill 2 and House Bill 3. Senate Bill 2 addressed cities and counties. House Bill 3 addressed school districts. So what this was all about was property tax reform. Going back to 1980, I think it was 1 or 82, There was some legislation passed by the Texas legislature that set what was called the rollback rate and the effective tax rate. Now, the rollback rate was the greatest extent to which municipalities and counties, cities and counties, etc., and school districts, by the way, and special districts like MUDs, college districts, hospital districts, could increase property taxes per year without allowing their citizens to vote on it. This rate, set back in 1981, pretty sure it was 8%. So a city, the city of Plano, could raise property taxes on properties taxed in both years, meaning existing properties, as an aggregate calculation across the entire city by up to 8% per year. Now, if you remember, in 1981, the inflation rate was over 8%. So the philosophy was, all right, cities and counties, you can raise property taxes enough to keep pace with inflation, but any more than 8%, then you have to allow your people to vote on it. At the time, people had to petition to have a vote, and you gather enough petition signatures, then you can have an actual vote. The people can vote on it. And whatever they raised the taxes to, let's say 9%, if the people voted to not allow that, then it would roll back to the allowed rate of 8%, hence the name rollback rate. The effective tax rate, as it was called, was setting your tax rate, which is totally different than the amount of tax money you collect, setting the tax rate to wherever it needs to be so that you're not collecting any more money in the next tax year than you collected this tax year. So on properties taxed in both years, that means existing properties. If you're growing and you're having new properties coming online, new improvements, those do not enter into the calculation. So, for instance, a county like Collin County has adopted the effective tax rate, now called the no new revenue rate, for many years in a row now. But the county of Collin is growing considerably. New properties are coming online every year, which don't factor into that calculation and still adds new money to the tax rolls because you got new citizens to take care of. So fast forward from 1981 to 2019. The property tax situation in Texas had not been a big issue since 1981 because for the most part, property values kept pace with inflation, a little like this. And nobody really much thought about it. But kind of around when the fracking boom started, when real estate values in Texas really started to amp up in the early 2010s, then suddenly property values increased 4%, 6%, 8%, 10%, 15%. Suddenly, the taxing authorities, cities, counties, ISDs, they had a little bit of a problem. So most of them just left their tax rate alone year after year. The tax rate was just the tax rate, and inflation went up, property values went up, it was about the same, and nobody really cared. But when inflation was 1.2% annually, but the property values were going up 11, 12, 15%, suddenly they couldn't leave their tax rate alone anymore, because if you keep the tax rate alone, but you have a 10 to 15% property value jump, then you're going to have a 10 to 15% tax increase, but the rollback rate set in 1981 said you can't have more than an 8% increase. So they started fiddling with the tax rates and lowering the rate so that their overall tax increase would be, in many cases, 7.99%. And they just milked it. They milked the gravy train. I believe milk is a key component in gravy, so that's all good. Not really a mixed metaphor. So in 2019, we finally got tax reform passed by the state legislature. So in Senate Bill 2, that rollback rate of 8% was reduced to 3.5% for cities and counties. House Bill 3 reduced it down to 2.5% for school districts. That's a different animal. I'll touch on that just a little bit. But by the way, all of this is explained in the annual Property Tax 101 seminar that I do with Scott Grigg, candidate for Collin County Tax Assessor Collector. We do that after property valuations come out in the spring, so please join us next year. But I digress. We got the rollback rate lowered to 3.5% for cities and counties and renamed to the voter approval rate. So this is 3.5%. That is the amount that voters ostensibly approve without having to vote on it. But now, if we exceed that 3.5% threshold, people don't have to petition. They get an automatic election on the November ballot to determine whether they want that tax increase. And I'm good with this. I championed this in the state legislature. And even now with inflation, my feeling is that if we want to increase taxes more than that amount, then we should be able to make a good case to the people. And I'd say this inflationary environment makes a good case. However, given the pressures of inflation, myself, many other members of council, we didn't want to put the screws to our people, so to speak, by also increasing taxes during this massive inflationary pressure. I honestly was not planning on championing the no new revenue rate again this year until inflation went so out of control. And I may not next year either, to be totally candid with you, because the no new revenue rate is not sustainable. You need either one or two things. You either need to keep pace with inflation, or you need new growth, new properties coming online to tax, as long as we're stuck with this property tax system, which I wholly advocate doing away with, but that's another story. So it's not sustainable. It's simple math to say you cannot sustain it without either growth or without low inflation or no inflation. So we can't sustain it forever, and the alternative is to add a lot more growth to Plano, which I know for a fact people don't want. So we'll see what happens next year, but I'm praying we don't have the same kind of issues we've had for the past 3 years. So all of this to say, Senate Bill 2 lowered that threshold to 3.5% for cities and counties. Now, that didn't go into effect until January 1st of 2020. I was elected in June of 2019 by the grace of God and the people of Plano, and we didn't wait for January 1st, 2020. We on council at the time unanimously adopted at the time called the effective tax rate, which would then be known as the no new revenue rate, the more intuitively known no new revenue rate, named no new revenue rate because it's raising no new revenue from properties taxed in both years. So a couple of things about that. So we did adopt it before we even had to, or we didn't even have to after that. We could have raised taxes 3.5%, but we still kept it flat. This is the 4th year running. I'm incredibly proud of that accomplishment. All credit to the City of Plano staff and City Manager Mark Israelson for making this happen, because it's a tough thing to do. And as Councilman Riccadelli pointed out tonight in the meeting, it's easy to achieve mediocrity with a tight budget. Likewise, it's easy to achieve greatness with a big budget, although I can think of many entities that actually only achieve mediocrity even with a great budget. But it's very difficult to achieve greatness and excellence like we do in Plano on a tight budget. But we are doing it, and I'm incredibly proud of that and incredibly grateful to the City of Plano staff for that. Now, a few things I need to note. When you see your actual tax bill, the City of Plano's portion of taxes accounts for about 19% of your total tax bill if you live in Collin County. The other 81% is made up largely of the school district, also by the County of Collin, and then by the Collin College District. The lion's share goes to the school district, but through the wonders of Robin Hood, as much money is going to be taken through what's called recapture. Robin Hood, they take from property-rich districts and give it to property-poor school districts. As much money is going to be, of your money, is going to be taken due to Robin Hood and given away elsewhere in the state, as the entire city of Plano is going to be collecting in property taxes. That much, again, is just going to be distributed throughout the state of your money. So Robin Hood is egregious. So we'll go on about that at length in the Property Tax 101 seminar in the spring. I do have it on my website as a webinar, though, by the way, that we did in 2020. So anyway, as I noted, this is an aggregate calculation, all the properties in the city. So you, as an individual homeowner, as I say, your mileage may vary, because if your property increased in value, I think everybody's did, increased in value the exact average of all properties, your taxes are going to stay the same. If your property went up more than average than all the other properties, you're going to see a little bit of a tax increase. If your property didn't go up as much in value as the average of all increases, you're actually going to see a little bit of a tax cut for your city of Plano taxes, and probably all taxes, because your home's valuation is your valuation. Now, this is after everything is considered, like homestead exemptions and everything, but this leads me to an important point, one of which I feel very strongly about given the inflationary environment. Only homeowners are afforded the protections of the homestead exemption, the over 65 freeze, things like that. People who rent, which are now 41% of residential properties in Plano, 41% of households in Plano rent. They get squat for protection. So when property values went up by 25%, 33% this year, they are getting hit full in the face. So we talk about the tax increases on property owners, homeowners. The much bigger issue is renters. Their property tax increases, because they don't pay the property tax bill directly, but they pay it through their rent, because the landlord or the apartment complex owner, whoever owns that property, they are writing that great big check, and they're not kicking themselves out of their homes. They're not depleting their own kids' college funds to pay that giant tax increase out of the kindness of their hearts on behalf of their tenants. They're raising rents, and they have to. So those are the people who are getting completely crushed by these rising property values, even though many of them don't even think they pay property taxes. They just look at their landlord and say, why are you jacking up my rent? But those taxes still have to be paid. And statistically speaking, the people who rent are less able to weather the kind of inflation we're going through right now. More of their income is spent on necessities. So that's why I felt very strongly about adopting the no new revenue rate again, recognizing that those people are still going to get a giant tax increase. So that's a consequence of having increased our rental proportion to such a great number. But those are the people who are going to suffer the most. So as we look forward in the next year, I hope these issues that we've experienced the past 3 years do not persist, or heaven forbid get any worse. But we need to be able to roll with the punches, which is why, again, I don't know that I'm going to be championing the no new revenue rate again next year unless we get a windfall or unless inflation comes way down, because something will have to give. And I want to maintain the city of excellence with the same character that we have all come to love. So with that, I would encourage you to check out also on my website the podcast I was on with Darren Yancey talking about eliminating property tax in Texas, and give that a serious look. In the meantime, I'm Shelby Williams from Plano City Council. Good night and God bless.